Everyone at Hartwell Academy knew who Madison Winters and Charlotte Voss were. You didn't have to ask. They were the daughters of people who flew private, vacationed in Aspen, and never bothered with price tags. When they walked into a room, people either stood up or shrank back, out of habit, fear, or envy. They weren't evil exactly, but they'd learned early on that kindness was optional. Charm was a choice. Respect, that had to be earned. And for someone like Elise Monroe, the quiet black custodian with calloused palms and eyes that held decades of stillness, there was nothing to be gained. Elise had worked at Hartwell for nearly 2 years. Every weekday, she arrived before dawn and left long after the last Mercedes SUV had pulled away from the faculty lot. She cleaned the floors, polished the trophy cases, made sure the restrooms didn't reek of entitlement. She spoke softly, rarely, and only when someone else spoke first. When she did, her voice was smooth and level, like rain on calm water. But Charlotte noticed something. It happened during a random lunch break. Charlotte had left her AirPods in the science wing, and when she doubled back to grab them, she caught sight of Elise. Not cleaning, not organizing, just sitting in an empty classroom, flipping through a thick biology textbook. Her lips moved slightly, as if she were reciting something under her breath. Charlotte leaned against the doorframe and smirked. "Didn't peg you for a science type," she said. Elise looked up. "Just brushing up on some old knowledge." Charlotte tilted her head. "Planning to teach now, too?" Elise smiled. "Not exactly." And that was the beginning. It started with jokes, whispers, snide one-liners, just loud enough to be overheard. Charlotte told Madison. The two of them made it into a game. One morning as Elise wheeled her supply cart past the senior lunch table, Madison muttered under her breath, but loud enough for others to catch it. "There goes Marie Curie with a mop." Charlotte giggled, probably writing a thesis on bleach. The laughter spread, not loud, just sharp, measured, like little pins. Some students laughed along, others just looked away. No one said anything. Elise kept walking. She always did. What they didn't notice was how her eyes lingered on the school's golden navy crest carved into the lobby wall. Not bitter, not broken, just calculating. They didn't see how she listened more than she spoke, or how she always had a worn leather notebook tucked into the side pocket of her cart, half filled with careful handwriting. There was one exception. Mr. Pennington, the AP Lit teacher, with a beard that made him look like a novelist, always made time for Elise. Once he caught her adjusting a crooked stack of To Kill a Mockingbird on a rolling cart. "Most folks just pile them up," he said. She shrugged. "That book deserves better than dog-eared edges." He grinned. "You've read it?" "Twice. Once in high school. Again when I was old enough to understand it." He never pressed for more after that. But every other Friday he started leaving books on the bench outside the break room. No notes, no questions. Just stories waiting to be read. Still, the mocking didn't stop, and Elise didn't flinch. And that, more than anything, made her dangerous. Before we keep going, if this is speaking to you, don't forget to hit like, leave a thought below, and maybe share it with someone who'd feel it too. Most of the lights at Hartwell Academy dimmed by 8 p.m., but a few stayed on, just enough to cast long shadows down the marble halls and across the polished floors. That's when Elise came alive in a different way. When the last bell had rung, the last latte cup had been tossed, and the teenage noise had quieted to nothing. She rolled her cart into the supply closet, changed into a fresh navy t-shirt, and walked down the corridor with something far more precious than cleaning spray in her hands. Her notebook, and her laptop, a dented 6-year-old Dell missing the letter N. She always went to room 2B. It had a flickering light and a desk with one short leg. The other staff avoided it. Too dark, too drafty, too forgotten. But for Elise, it was perfect. The door didn't lock. She didn't need privacy. She needed space, silence, a chance to breathe. There, with her back to the world, she logged into her university portal. She was just 6 credits away from completing her degree in educational leadership. The school that ran Hartwell had a tucked-away clause in their staff handbook. Full tuition coverage for employees who work 30 or more hours a week. Most people never noticed. Elise did. It wasn't about ambition anymore. It wasn't about proving herself. She was finishing something that life had violently interrupted. 12 years ago, Elise was Elise Hayes. She had a stable job in Baltimore, a corner office with her name on the door, and a daughter named Zoe who wore pink snow boots in the summer just because she liked how they squeaked. Elise had been the director of curriculum innovation for the public school district. She used to lead meetings. She used to sign off on budgets. Then came the snowstorm. Her husband's truck slid off the road, pinned by a delivery van on I-95. He didn't make it. Zoe, just 6 years old, held on for 2 months. Surgeries, tubes, prayers. But in the end, pneumonia took what was left. After the funeral, Elise left everything. Couldn't hear a child laugh without freezing. Couldn't walk past a classroom without her stomach twisting into knots. She couch surfed for months, worked odd jobs, drifted until she landed in a tiny apartment outside Antioch, California, with thin walls and a view of the laundromat. But she never stopped reading. She never stopped learning. One night, scrolling through education forums, she found it. A university program, buried in the digital weeds, focused on educational equity. It was small, quiet, but real. There was an option to go undercover. They were looking for someone who could observe. Not from a podium, but from a mop bucket. Someone who'd lived both sides. Someone who understood the power dynamics without needing them explained. She said yes. Not because she needed the paycheck, because she needed the purpose. So Elise applied using her maiden name, passed the background checks, tucked her credentials into a folder at the back of her closet. She wore a name tag and a uniform, smiled when spoken to, and memorized the school's layout in less than a week. She noticed how fast the elevators closed when she was walking toward them, how people spoke louder around her, as if volume could substitute respect. At night in room 2B, she scribbled field notes on behavior patterns, on who held the doors and who didn't, on how often students use the word scholarship like an insult. She kept a log of quotes, interactions, hallway dynamics. Nothing grand, nothing cinematic, but honest. Painfully honest. And when it got to be too much, she texted her sister back in Detroit. "You sleeping?" Sometimes the reply came fast. "You still being a superhero?" Elise would send back a picture of her laptop, the screen glowing faintly. "Chapter 9's kicking my ass." Her sister would reply every time. "Still the smartest person I know." By early spring, most seniors at Hartwell Academy were mentally already gone. College acceptance emails had rolled in. Class participation dropped. Dress codes loosened. The school days had a sleepy haze to them. But for Madison Winters and Charlotte Voss, the usual thrill of casual cruelty had started to fade. Teasing Elise didn't hit the same anymore. The jokes weren't landing like they used to. They wanted more than amusement. They wanted a reaction. So one Monday morning, Charlotte walked into the admin office, her expression wide-eyed and staged. She leaned in toward the front desk assistant with a voice low and full of fake concern. "I didn't want to say anything, but I think the janitor's been snooping in classrooms." The woman behind the desk blinked. "Elise?" Charlotte nodded, solemn and sugar-coated. "I saw her in room 3C late last week, after hours, alone. Looked like she was going through a file cabinet. The timing was strategic. That week, standardized testing materials had just arrived. Security was tighter than usual. It didn't take much to stir doubt." Later that afternoon, Elise was called into facilities. The manager, a nervous man with a buzz cut and khakis 2 sizes too loose, asked her to sit. Nothing accusatory, just protocol. "Have you been spending time in unassigned rooms?" "I clean every room I'm scheduled for." "Right. But do you linger?" She didn't blink. "I take breaks, same as everyone else." He scribbled something on his clipboard. "No issues with your work, just following up on a report. If there's a concern about my performance, I'd appreciate a direct conversation." The man's ears turned pink. "No concern." "Really?" Elise stood calmly and walked out. In the hallway, Charlotte was leaning against a nearby wall, pretending to check her phone. The smile she gave Elise wasn't friendly. "Everything okay, Ms. Monroe?" Elise met her gaze. "Better than you'd think." For the first time, Charlotte's grin faltered. Just for a second. But it was there. A crack. It didn't stop them, though. 2 days later, Madison dropped a silver necklace outside the janitor's closet. On purpose. Then at lunch, she made a scene. It's gone. I know I put it in my locker this morning. A few students gathered. She held up her wrist like it was broken. It had my initials. I've had it since 5th grade, Charlotte added, half laughing, half whispering. Maybe check the mop bucket. Some laughed, others looked away. A staff member overheard and offered to check security footage. That's when Madison backpedaled. Oh, it's probably nothing. I probably just left it at home. The incident fizzled, but the intent stayed. That evening, Mr. Pennington passed Elise in the hallway and stopped. You okay? She nodded. You've been here long enough to know how some of these kids operate. Too long, she said. He hesitated. Anything I can do? Keep doing what you do. That's rare enough. What neither of them knew was that Elise had already sent her first formal report to the university board. Dates, incidents, behavior logs, names redacted. For now. She wasn't the only one watching anymore. A private firm had been quietly hired to audit Hartwell. Anonymous surveys, coded interviews, fake engagement quizzes. Charlotte and Madison still thought they were in control, but eyes were turning, and Elise had stopped waiting for the system to fix itself. Before she was sweeping floors under fluorescent lights, Elise Monroe had another name, another life. Back then, she was Elise Hayes, Director of Curriculum Design for the Baltimore Unified School District. She had a corner office, 3 staff members reporting to her, and a mahogany plaque on the wall from the state superintendent that read, Innovator in Urban Education. She had a husband, Marcus, who made blueberry pancakes on Saturdays, and a 6-year-old daughter, Zoe, who insisted on wearing a cape to kindergarten every day. Their life had structure, laughter, warmth, until the storm. Marcus was driving home late from work when the roads iced over. A delivery truck jackknifed across 95. His sedan didn't stand a chance. He died on impact. Zoe survived the crash, but barely. 2 months in the hospital, 11 surgeries, a year of rehab. Insurance helped, but not enough. Elise emptied their savings, cashed out her pension, sold the house. She stayed strong for Zoe, read to her every night, brushed her hair in the mornings even when her own hands shook. And then, after everything, it was pneumonia that took her. A week after the funeral, Elise resigned. She couldn't walk into a school building without seeing Zoe's empty desk, couldn't stand the sound of children laughing in hallways without breaking inside. So she vanished. Rented rooms, temp jobs, silence. She ended up in Antioch, California, in a 1-bedroom apartment above a nail salon. She didn't know what she was looking for. She just knew she wasn't ready to be seen. But she never stopped reading. She never stopped asking why systems failed the people who needed them most. One night, while doom-scrolling through educational forums, she found something. An obscure program out of a university consortium, buried deep in a post about racial equity in K-12 schools. It offered adult learners a chance to complete a degree in educational leadership. But there was more. They were piloting a new kind of initiative. They were looking for someone with first-hand experience in schools, someone willing to go undercover, to observe environments where traditional evaluations fell short. They weren't looking for applause. They were looking for evidence. Elise didn't hesitate. She applied under her maiden name. Her resume went unmentioned. She passed the background checks like any other staff applicant. No one knew who she'd been. No one knew what she carried. And that's how she became the night custodian at Hartwell Academy. At first, she kept her distance, watched, listened. She mapped out behaviors, interactions, subtle shifts in body language between students and staff. She saw a senior teacher imitate a student's stutter behind their back. She heard a counselor mention a girl's financial aid status during a staff lunch like it was a punchline. She watched Charlotte and Madison treat hallways like runways. Their entitlement inherited, not earned. None of it surprised her, but it still stung. The founder of Hartwell, Margaret Hartwell, had envisioned the school as a space for future leaders from all walks of life. That mission was now buried beneath legacy admissions, curated diversity brochures, and booster club donations with 6-figure checks. So Elise started writing. Each night, she logged what she saw. Recurring language, passive silence, when teachers looked away, when students looked right through her. She joined committees no one wanted, Sat in on staff meetings, always quiet, always watching. And in room 2B, after the halls emptied, she studied. Each assignment she turned in brought her closer to something. Closure, maybe, or justice. One night she came across a sentence in a case study that stuck with her. True authority doesn't announce itself. It waits to be noticed. She underlined it twice. Graduation was 3 weeks away. Her GPA topped her cohort, and no one at Hartwell had any idea what was coming. Graduation was coming fast. By mid-May, the hallways at Hartwell Academy buzzed with rehearsals, cap fittings, and last-minute senior pranks that barely skirted the line. Madison Winters and Charlotte Voss spent most of their time in the senior lounge, scrolling through college emails and tossing snide remarks like darts. But the game was wearing thin. It wasn't enough anymore to mutter insults or drop earrings by accident. They needed control. They needed attention. Charlotte made the next move. She waited until a quiet lunch period when most of the staff were off campus. Then, just loud enough for a nearby teacher's aide to hear, she said she thought someone had been in her locker. Nothing missing, yet, but she was certain the janitor had been near it. "I don't want to accuse anyone," she said with a soft shrug. "But isn't the staff supposed to stay out of our areas?" The seed was planted. That's all it took. Elise was called into admin again. The questions were friendly on the surface, but lined with suspicion. "We've heard some concerns. Just wondering if you've been in any personal spaces, lockers, senior lounge, things like that." Elise stayed still. "I go where I'm assigned, nowhere else." The administrator smiled tightly and nodded, already flipping the page. Afterward, as Elise pushed her cart through the West Wing, Madison passed by with a bag of cookies in hand. "You know," she said sweetly, "they're doing a background check on everyone next year." "Just saying." Elise didn't respond, but something in her eyes shifted. Not anger, not fear, just stillness, like glass before it shatters. That night she sat in room 2B with her laptop open, her notebook beside it. Her final project, an institutional equity analysis, was finished. Her final report to the university board had been submitted. Her data, her logs, her evidence, they were complete. The patterns, the quotes, the silences, all of it. But the speech, the one they'd cleared her to deliver as valedictorian, that still needed to be written. She stared at the blinking cursor, then began. "I came to this school with a mop in one hand and a question in the back of my mind." The words poured out, not from anger but clarity. She didn't need to shame anyone. The truth would do the work. Hartwell had a reputation, rankings, endowments, Ivy-bound seniors. But the real test had never been about grades. It was about character, and that's where the cracks had formed. The following week, graduation rehearsal filled the auditorium with yawns and applause that felt rehearsed. Charlotte and Madison strutted in matching champagne-colored stoles. They posed for selfies like royalty. Elise stood at the back in a plain black gown. No cords, no medal. She'd declined both. She didn't need accessories. She just needed one moment. The dean approached her backstage with the ceremony schedule. "You ready, Ms. Monroe?" Elise looked him in the eye. "I've been ready." Neither Madison nor Charlotte glanced her way as they passed. Why would they? To them, she was still invisible, still background. But the stage was waiting, and for the first time in 2 years, Elise wasn't stepping into a room to watch. She was stepping into it to be seen. The sky over Antioch that morning was cloudless, too bright for how heavy some hearts felt as they walked through the stone archway into Hartwell Academy's auditorium. Inside, the rows filled fast, parents in tailored suits and designer heels, siblings with bouquets, friends with phones in hand. The air was thick with pride and performance. Charlotte Voss had her makeup professionally done at 6 a.m. Madison Winters wore her family crest stitched discreetly into her gown collar. They stood near the front, laughing like royalty, confident, untouched. Backstage, Elise Monroe stood quietly in her plain black robe. No cords, no medals. She'd turned those down, didn't need them. All she needed was this. The dean, Dr. Linton, approached her with the program in hand, his voice low. "You ready?" Elise nodded. "Been ready a long time." The ceremony began as expected. Honors were listed, names were read, parents clapped, some cried. The jazz trio played something polite and forgettable. Then Dr. Linton stepped up to the podium one last time. "Before we conclude today's commencement," he said, his voice echoing in the hush, "we have one final honor to announce." Students shifted. A few glanced around, puzzled. This year, our Board of Trustees approved a confidential academic pilot program offering Hartwell staff the chance to pursue higher education while maintaining anonymity. The criteria were strict: academic excellence, professional integrity, and full-time commitment. Even Madison raised an eyebrow. "This year's top academic honor," he continued, "goes not to a student you studied beside, but to someone most of you passed by without a second thought." He paused. "Please welcome Elise Monroe, this year's valedictorian." For a moment, nothing moved. Then the silence cracked. Gasps, whispers. A phone dropped. Someone laughed, but it stopped halfway. Charlotte froze, her eyes wide. Madison blinked, lips parting like she couldn't quite process the name. Elise walked calmly to the stage, her steps measured, her shoulders back. Her gown fluttered slightly as she climbed the steps. She didn't look at anyone until she reached the podium. Then she looked straight at them and began. "I came to this school with a mop in one hand and a question in the back of my mind." Her voice was clear, steady, the kind of calm that silences rooms without trying. "I wanted to understand what kind of place this really was, beyond the rankings, beyond the mission statements, beyond the curated images. I wanted to know if respect here was something earned or something reserved for those with the right name, the right zip code, the right shoes." Students shifted in their seats. I cleaned up after students who whispered about me while I stood 3 feet away. I was laughed at for reading textbooks in empty classrooms. I was called invisible things in hallways full of people who said nothing. She paused. "But I wasn't just reading. I was watching. I was studying, not just for a degree, but for answers." She turned briefly toward the staff. "And now I have them." Her eyes swept the room. She saw Charlotte, saw Madison. Neither one was smiling now. "I stand here today not just as your valedictorian, but as a mirror, because this school claims to prepare future leaders. It claims to teach values, but too often those lessons are buried under legacy privileges and silent complicity." Someone coughed. Someone else sat back, hard. "And I'm sure some of you are wondering how I got here." She let the pause breathe. 2 years ago, I was approached by the university's board. They'd received private complaints about entitlement, about discrimination, about a culture where kindness was selective and dignity was conditional. They asked me to observe, not from an office, but from within, quietly, fully. So I came, as a janitor. She didn't flinch when the murmurs rose. She waited. Let the room catch up. I was asked to listen in the spaces where students say what they really think because they believe no one is listening. But I was. I watched how students with wealth mock those without, how some staff ignored it, how even good teachers looked the other way when cruelty wore a pretty face. She turned back toward the students. "Some of you, you knew, and you did nothing." Charlotte's fingers clenched the paper in her lap. Madison's eyes had dropped to the floor. The most painful part wasn't the behavior. It was how casual it became, how normalized, how public, and how often it was rewarded with laughter and popularity. She softened slightly. "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to remind you. You don't get to decide someone's worth by what they wear or how they earn a paycheck. You don't measure dignity by last names or square footage." She let that land, then continued. "I once had a daughter. Her name was Zoe. She would have been your age now." The air shifted. Quiet swept the rows like wind. "She never got to wear a cap and gown. I'm not telling you that for sympathy. I'm telling you because I look at you, and I see who she might have become. And I wonder, if she had been here, would she have been laughed at too?" No one dared move. And if you leave this place thinking the world owes you something because of your name, you've already failed. She paused. "One last time. I submitted my final report last week. Based on my findings, the school's scholarship program will be restructured to prioritize contribution, not legacy. A 5-year audit of disciplinary action has been approved. And yes, students who engage in harassment, verbal, social, or otherwise, will face formal review. Now there was no mistaking it. The collective inhale, the rustling, the stunned glances between parents and faculty. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. She turned back towards Charlotte and Madison one last time. And accountability doesn't care how rich your father is. Then she stepped back. Not a word more. No applause yet. Just the sound of a school remembering what it was supposed to stand for. The ceremony ended with only half the energy it began with. Some students clapped, tentatively, almost by reflex. A few parents stood. Others stayed frozen in their seats, stunned. A couple of families slipped out early, their silence louder than applause. Elise returned to her seat, not in the back row like before, but near the front. Board members and professors surrounded her now. And for the first time since she stepped foot into Hartwell, they looked at her with something different in their eyes. Not pity, not politeness, respect. Mr. Pennington stood at a distance, waiting for the moment. When he approached, he didn't speak right away, just nodded slowly. "You didn't just speak," he said finally. "You changed the air in the room." Elise gave a soft smile. The air needed changing. Outside, the sun felt too bright for what had just unfolded inside those walls. On the lawn, some younger students buzzed with awe. A girl in a red dress whispered to her friend. "I didn't even know she was in school," her friend replied. "I didn't even know she could talk like that." The realization was just beginning to spread. What they had missed, what they had chosen not to see. Charlotte didn't speak as she exited the auditorium. Her father stood near their car, jaw clenched, his voice low when he spoke to her. Whatever came next for her, it wouldn't be applause. Madison's mother waited near the valet, arms crossed, stone-faced. There were no hugs, no flowers, just cold silence and tension that refused to break. Inside, a small crowd formed around Elise. Teachers who had once only given her polite nods now came forward to shake her hand. Some even apologized. A few simply said, "I didn't know." Later that night, back in her apartment above the nail salon, Elise sat at the kitchen table with a plastic container of leftover chicken salad and the folded graduation program beside her. Her phone buzzed. An email. Subject line, "Thank you." Message. "Your final report is under review. Policy meetings begin next week. Your courage will help shape the future of this school." She read it twice, then set her phone down. She didn't feel pride. She didn't feel vindication. What she felt was something quieter, solid, rooted, like standing barefoot on the ground after a long walk uphill. And the story wasn't over. A teacher's assistant had filmed her speech from the third row and uploaded it that evening. Within hours, the clip began to spread through parent groups, alumni threads, and education forums. The title was simple: Janitor or Genius? Hartwell's graduation shocker. The video exploded. Comments poured in. Some praised her bravery. Others demanded change. A few denied anything had ever been wrong at all. But those were quickly drowned out. By Monday, Charlotte had been summoned for a disciplinary hearing. Her parents tried to negotiate quietly, but the evidence was already in the board's hands. Her summer internship, one arranged through her father's company, was quietly withdrawn. Word was she'd have to complete community service hours before receiving her diploma officially. Madison's parents pushed back harder, threatened legal action, demanded retractions. But when the school released excerpts from Elise's documentation, blurred names but real witness statements, they went silent. Madison was allowed to graduate, but her honors distinction? Revoked. Neither girl said anything publicly, but classmates noticed something had shifted. The snickers stopped. The whispers died off. The spell had broken. And as for Elise, a week later, she received a formal offer. Director of Equity and Inclusion Initiatives for the entire district. She accepted. On her last day at Hartwell, she walked the halls one final time with her cart. She paused outside the supply closet, pulled a sticky note from her pocket, and left it on the door. Respect isn't owed. It's revealed. Clean floors, clear eyes. EM. Then she walked away, no mop in hand, just a satchel over her shoulder and the calm of someone who no longer needed to hide. Elise Monroe returned to Hartwell Academy 1 week later, not in uniform, not with a mop, but in a navy blazer, heels clicking softly down the polished floors she once scrubbed clean. She didn't carry a cart this time. She carried purpose. The auditorium was quieter now. No flowers, no cameras, just folding chairs, coffee cups, and the nervous rustle of notepads as new hires settled in for their orientation. A few glanced at her as she approached the podium. They didn't recognize her, not yet, but they would. She began without a microphone. "Your job title doesn't determine your influence," she said. "How you treat people when no one's watching, that does." No slides, no handouts. Just her voice, even and grounded. Her presence filling the space more than any spotlight ever could. She spoke about moments, how the smallest choices in hallways and break rooms can ripple into culture, how silence can be permission, and how empathy isn't a workshop, it's a discipline. She didn't talk about the speech, or the fallout, or the viral video now pushing 2 million views under the title Janitor or Genius. She didn't have to. Everyone in that room had already seen it. They'd watched the slow pan across stunned faces, the still shot of Elise at the podium, the caption burned into their minds. "Accountability doesn't care how rich your father is." After the orientation, a young teacher approached her in the hallway. "I just wanted to say, your story, it changed the way I see this place, the way I think about who's watching." Elise smiled. Good. She meant it, because that's what mattered. Not the clicks, not the applause, but the fact that someone had learned something. The school had changed too. The scholarship program was revised, now need-based and blind to legacy names. The disciplinary audit began the following month, revealing years of overlooked incidents and unequal treatment. Several policy updates followed. Training sessions were no longer optional. Bystander accountability was written into the staff contract. The culture didn't shift overnight, but it shifted. In the spring, Elise was invited to speak at the Regional Education Summit, a panel on invisible labor and institutional equity. Her name appeared on the brochure alongside national experts. But when she stood up, she didn't speak like an expert. She spoke like someone who'd once been overlooked. And that, more than anything, made people listen. Back at Hartwell, the custodial closet still had the sticky note on the door. Some said it had been framed behind glass. Respect is an ode. It's revealed. New students asked about it. Teachers told them the story of the woman who cleaned the floors and then cleaned the system. By fall, Elise had a corner office again. But she didn't close the door much. Didn't speak unless it mattered. Didn't remind people who she used to be. She didn't have to. Because now when she walked into a room, people didn't look down. They stood up. Not out of fear, not out of habit, but because they finally understood who had been among them all along. And they listened, because they'd learned what respect sounds like when it's earned. Quiet, steady, and impossible to ignore.